So when the folks at Conneaut first approached me with the idea of the Coming Home project, I wasn't sure how to do it or what to do, but for me, home is where you grew up. I mean, I grew up in Conneaut. It is pronounced Conneaut, Conneaut, bum, 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 bum. I was in band, so that was our fight song. So this is the house. This is where I was born and raised, 745 Maple Avenue. The house up, or the window up at the top with the thing hanging in it, that was my bedroom. It was interesting growing up in Conneaut when I was young. It was like, they kind of joked it was like Mayberry, because it really was. I mean, we still had, I would ride my bicycle downtown, and we had the drugstore that still had a soda fountain, I mean, it was just one of those towns where you went out when the daylight, and you came home when it was dark, because that's when it was time to eat. I mean, and we basically played all day. And off in the distance, you can hear the railroad, which is kind of the story of a town like this. I mean, this is, you don't think of the traditional Rust Belt, we're in Northeast Ohio. It's right in the border of Lake Erie and Pennsylvania, but it really is one of those communities that suffered. I mean, when I grew up, General Electric had a plant here. It was right down the street. There was another plant called Webb Manufacturing. Now, my name is Craig Webb. We used to joke that I had the wrong Dale Webb as a dad. My dad was named Dale, and then the person who owned the plant's name was Dale. But as time went on, I mean, the industry left. I mean, it's just like a lot of tales of urban areas in Ohio, and that happened to Conneaut. And so, I mean, it's interesting that I did note that it did go Trump, the last election. But when I was growing up, it was a heavily Democratic town. I mean, you had a lot of workers, a lot of union workers here, and, there were no Republicans. I mean, it was rare to have a Republican in town, or even a Republican politician. But it flipped to Trump last election, and not by a small margin. And so it's one of those communities that's still trying to find its identity, and the idea of coming home is, I think someone said to me today, you could never come home because it's never truly home again. I mean, I think you maybe heard the train whistle. When I was growing up, I mean, there were train whistles all the time. And we have right next to the railroad tracks, or just a block away, and people used to say, the sound of the train is the sound of money, because that means there's money in town. And like anything else, the trains left too. I mean, there's still a little bit of a switching yard here, and the railroad doesn't come here as often as it used to, but it still comes through. Where you're from shapes who you are, and for me, really, growing up in Conneaut really shaped me, because this is my first newspaper job. I was a paper boy, and I worked for the Conneaut News Herald, God rest his soul. But I could tell you everyone who lived in every house. I could tell you whether they were a good tipper or not. And so really my love for newspapers started there. And I think that inquisitiveness that even early on, I kind of knew that I wanted to be in news and be in newspapers, or just be a newsman. And it was kind of shaped by delivering a paper. And we were an afternoon paper, and every house I could tell you, subscriber, not subscriber, not subscriber, subscriber. I mean, I could tell you everyone on the street, and it was a town where you knew everyone's name. So, I mean, I think, your hometown does shape who you are and who you become. And I'm Conneaut, and Conneaut is me. I grew up on Maple Avenue, and that was the house where I basically grew up. When I was in high school, my parents moved to the north side of the tracks. And I'm not sure if there really was a difference between the north side of the tracks and the south side of the tracks in town, but my teenage mind was like, oh, we moved to the better side of town, because we're 3 blocks from Lake Erie and the beach. And so this was my house. I grew up when I was in high school, and where I spent my high school years. Went to Conneaut High School. I was a Spartan. I was a band geek. Didn't play football, but I was a band geek every Friday night. And it was a town that really was defined. I mean, it was interesting that a lot of times, life stopped on Friday nights. I mean, you say Friday Night Lights, and it was one of these towns where really during football season, you could shoot a cannon down Main Street, because everybody was at the football game. And so it really was a town that had a lot of community pride. They had pride in the Spartans and pride in that team, and they lived and died in the fall on Friday nights. And so this is where I spent my high school years, was in this house on Grove Street. So they say location, location, location. I mean, this is the location where I grew up. And the beach is as pretty today as it was when I was here. And it's interesting, this, you know, they say the future of Conneaut really lies in tourism, and you don't get better than this. In fact, in August of every year, they have the annual D-Day reenactment where some 40,000 people come to watch them. They literally storm the beach, planes swoop in, and they reenact the storming of the beaches of Normandy. I mean, it is quite a popular attraction, but you know, talking to some folks in town, that a lot of the houses are now selling for people who are just staying here for like 2 or 3 weeks, or just using them as rentals because people want to come down here and spend a week down here. I know when I come home, we always walk the beach and look for beach glass. So we walk the beach, and we have a glass container at home that says beach glass on it, and every time we fill it with more glass. And in fact, this past summer we finally filled it to the top. So we have to start over for our next future trips. So you talk to folks in town, they say the future is tourism, and nothing symbolizes that more than the breakwall barbecue. You know, it kind of holds a special place in my heart because I was too young, but my grandfather, Cash Brown, owned Brown's Resort, and he built this. And this is the original footprint, and it was basically, he had card tables in there. You sat in wooden, uncomfortable card, you know, like the wooden chairs, folding chairs. And it was interesting because he didn't want people to get too comfortable because he wanted to turn the seats, but he bred his own Lake Erie perch, and it was right out of this restaurant where Brown's Resort was. And so, it's interesting now that this kind of symbolizes the future of the town, and kind of that turning point.
How are you?
So this is just a glimpse of one small town in Ohio. As you read in the article that accompanies this video, it was interesting that they say the biggest rivalry here is not necessarily politics, it's whether you vote for the Browns or the Steelers. And it's just kind of interesting, and it's, you know, while it's political, and you drive around town, there are Trump signs, there are Biden signs, you know, it's my hometown. I mean, you know, it's people rooted for the Steelers and people rooted for the Browns. And personally, I'm a Browns guy, and so we were a Browns household. But I had an uncle who was a Steelers household. But you know, we all learned to get along, and we would sit down for dinner and break bread and eat some ham loaf, and maybe have a pepperoni roll or two. So this is a little glimpse of my hometown.